So I won't give you a full product demo here, but just kind of, since we were one of the first in the US to come up with a mobile technology for wagering, some of the lessons learned back in early 2011 when we first launched, and how the product has kind of evolved over the last couple years, which is fairly quick in the big scheme of things. Let me see here. I think that my presentation is not up. This is it. Thank you. So I think Philippe mentioned this the other day from the EPMA meeting. I think many of our markets right now, there's been a large downturn with the economic slump, with competition from other forms of wagering. As usual with the economic slump, governments are looking for other ways to get revenue and therefore opening up new ways of wagering. It's happening in the US over the last 15 years. Used to be just Atlantic City and Las Vegas, of course, and now most people live within an hour of a full casino. So that's been a huge competitive pressure. It really kicked in with the economic downturn, approximately 2007, 2008. But the market right now is extremely competitive in North America, Canada, and the US. Though we are global, obviously our core market for United Tote is in North America. And so we've had a very tough go of it. I know some of our competitors here, like Sportech, knows the market's pretty tough up there as well. But this kind of gives an overview that the handle, luckily in the last year or so, has stabilized, maybe down 1% or 2% this year. That comes from Equibase and the Jockey Club. But looking at that, as we talk about, okay, how do we get a younger crowd to wager? How do we get people who are all walking around with smartphones in their hands to wager easily? I think the focus I have is that's where we went with our app when we developed it back in 2011 and rolled it out. What we see now is that's great. It's sometimes a little bit of a softer benefit because that person who's wagering, are they going to use that mobile phone? Are they going to wager more because they're using the mobile phone? You know, there's some stats that show that if they're already a handicapper, that they will potentially place more wagers when they have more information, especially when they're at the track in their hand. But in reality, it's not, you know, that person's a handicapper already. They have their bankroll. They're going to bet the same amount they would have in the past for the most part. So encouraging them more. So what we're talking about now is more the hard benefit, which is the cost savings. If we talk kind of, that's where we've been heading. So we've said to our customers, we've taken as much cost as we can out of operating your tote for you. So reducing the mean time between failure of our equipment, or increasing that mean time between failure, reducing the amount of labor cost involved for us, making our software more automated from the back end side. But now let us help you take cost out of your operation by giving you new technologies that are focused on reducing your main drivers. So talking through the obvious benefits of mobile wagering, of course, you're going to attract a younger crowd. I think that the differentiation between that young and old, I think as Paul mentioned, everyone has a smartphone now. Over 50% of people over 60 even in the United States now have smartphones. It's hard to get a phone without, without the full internet on it. Example, 3 years ago, I'd never received a text or an SMS from my parents, and now they're posting on Facebook from their iPhones, and my parents are retired, and so it's definitely, the shift has occurred in the United States. Of course, bringing young people in is a key element. Your equipment, so as you can see, we have multiple providers out there, and they show these really nice terminals, and we continue to develop terminals as well. But those terminals will always be older than what the patron walks into your track or OTB with. They literally you'll never be able to keep up from a tote standpoint with the equipment that's coming out from the Samsungs and the HTCs, et cetera, the Apple. So that's, again, another huge pro of this. You also get the live entertainment aspect when you're at the track, which I should differentiate too. In the US, in North America, there's different licensing. So our mobile app is geared towards usage at the track. It's not available via the internet. You must connect to the Wi-Fi there. That's a different area called the ADW space, which is a different regulatory area. And that's a separate takeout rates, different regulations on what the track gets in terms of payment. So our big push here is to get, and our customers want a solution that allows them to add basically an infinite amount of extra tote terminals at the track or at their OTB, attract younger patrons, but not have to pay a huge lease fee to us or purchase a large amount of equipment. So again, the live entertainment technology, CRM opportunities. We've seen this with Keeneland, a very large track and a great customer of ours. They use it, driving more people. When you're talking in the U.S., over probably 95% of wagers made are made in cash. So there's basically no way to track that patron. So giving people a tool that they like enough to actually set up an account and wager on account, which means you can collect their information, you can get their email, their info, and market to them after they've left the track, maybe from your ADW, which is your web-based solution. But social integration, for a couple of years ago, we've integrated Twitter with our app, so once you place a wager on your mobile device, it pops up and you can say, I just placed a wager on the Kentucky Derby, and it pops it to Twitter, and it's encouraging users, again, to create that buzz. All great things, but I think the key thing, real measurable benefit, is that reduced cost. Is what we've really been pushing. Is it helps from an automation and cost reduction standpoint. If you look at the revenue right now for running a live racing event, I was generous here. It says barely covers expenses, and I think that in many cases in the North American market, it's maybe generous to say that revenue barely covers it. A lot of times there are tracks out there still struggling to make ends meet. If you look at the large expense, of course, are the labor, the maintenance, the satellite signals. So like in the U.S., it's pretty much monopoly with Roberts, and then Tote. So those are some of the highest things. Typical OTBs or off-track betting sites, similar. You just don't have as much of the maintenance because usually those are newer facilities. Most tracks in the United States are older. And the older tracks, when you're talking about a typical day at a track, maybe a place that seats 2,000 would have maybe 100 people in it. So maintaining a large facility, maintaining the track, maintaining, if you go to some of the premier tracks, I think if you haven't been to some of the premier tracks in the U.S., go to the Belmont in New York City. You'll see paint peeling off the walls, et cetera. So there's huge maintenance costs there. But the OTB doesn't have as much, but they have the signal satellite and the Tote. Usually the signal satellite's very high for them, maybe labor. Actually, I debated whether or not that was the same. And then, of course, being a Tote operator, our biggest expense is labor. We have to have folks out there at the endpoints supporting our machines, dealing with paper jams, actually running the Tote. We have that centralized more in our big hubs. And then, of course, paper, which traditionally the paper for the Tote machines is the cost is borne by the Tote company rather than the customers, though that's been shifting a bit. So what's the value proposition that we go out with? If you look at something like a mobile technology that works at the track, you can see that from a driver standpoint, it helps all of our customers, and it helps us in terms of reducing initial cost. Your labor can go down. So it's basically the culmination of all the different ideas of the last 10 years that people tried to push, and I think were tough to get into the market, which was self-service, account-based wagering. With the mobile platform, you're now giving, and I'd love anyone to come back. We have a demo out back. You can actually see a development of our app. But basically, you actually have driven, you're giving that person past performances. You're giving them live video feeds on their mobile device. You're giving them enough data that it actually is attractive finally. You're not trying to force them into setting up that account. They're actually interested in setting up the account, and they head that direction on their own. And it's kind of the final way that we've been able to kind of get people moving to the account-based piece. And I think that the key here too is that you're from a Tote standpoint, the Totes have historically in North America basically been the financing arms for the tracks. Huge amount of equipment mainly that we're putting into these tracks, and basically financing it over typically 5 to 10 year deals. And that's a broken model. I mean, really the tracks are tight on their capital expenditure budgets, so is Tote. So any way you can reduce that initial lump sum cash output for the initial cost is huge. So really, I think, you know, in basic summary, like I said, our app, you can come back if you like at lunch, we can give you a demo, I have some great guys here, is that I think that the big sales point is that you're actually giving a better experience to the patron who's at the track or at the OTB, but you're doing it at much lower cost in terms of labor, in terms of equipment for everyone. So, you know, from that standpoint, what we've seen over the last few years, when we first created this app, we actually developed it to try and bring in that younger patron who came in. We went out and did the, you know, coming from a Lean Six Sigma background, we did the look and see. We went out and sat, and I had teams at our first pilot site sit at every single entrance and try and get people to sign up. We learned quickly that the younger patrons, especially at the big premier tracks like Churchill Downs, they are, first of all, they're not betting much. They're there for entertainment. They're there to have a drink. They're there to watch the horses, and they're not really handicappers. But they're definitely not willing to stop and sign up for an account. So at that point, we added into our app the ability to sign up for the account in-app. We started working on our kiosk, which is basically a cash, a place where you can go create an account, put money on the account via cash, and withdraw from the account, so without talking to a person, and making it as fast as possible. But basically, as we learned too, we're B2B typically, and this is a very B2C product. And so one of the things we've learned is and we've seen this with some of our customers, such as Hoosier Park in the state of Indiana, that has really done well with the marketing. And what happened was, what we built as an app to bring in that younger crowd turned into the app that all the Gold Room players, the older guys, the guys who've been there for years, love. They were the ones that started to seek out the iPads that they got from their, you know, their grandchildren for Christmas, and they have our app up, and they're using the normal terminal, but they're also using the app. And so that's actually where it ended up trending, and we saw that, and so we started to gear, and we came up with a more advanced version of the app that was more geared towards them. We kept the simple version, but what we've seen is a slow adoption, and hopefully, I think a paradigm shift will happen over the next few years as more and more tracks get the fact that reducing, you don't need 500 terminals that sit idle most of the year. You need 50 terminals and Wi-Fi, and basically you can expand on those big days. And you're basically reducing your own costs and reducing the need for all that labor. I think back to the marketing, we've even created marketing packages. Again, we're B2B typically, but we create a generic marketing package that we hand now to our customers and say, use this, because we've seen, you know, the places that have marketed well, we're seeing over 15% utilization of this, which I think is fairly impressive. When you're at a physical track, you know, you can get up and walk 10 feet away, you can talk to a teller, you can walk up to a self-service machine, but for the fact that 15% of people are just pulling up on their phone, connecting to the Wi-Fi and using it, and you see that you know, that was a year ago, I'd say that's one of our better customers, that was at 3%, but even the places where they're not marketing, you see a slow growth. Over time, word gets out, and you're seeing, you know, starting at 3, moving up to 5, 6, but when you're really marketed, you can really rapidly move folks here. The other thing is, convincing our customers, actually, it's a big paradigm shift for them to think when they renew a Tote contract and they're saying, I want 300 terminals again, and you walk into their track and it's one of their busy days and maybe 50 of those terminals are being used. And you're saying, you know, do you really, you know, if you move to this new model where it's more account-based, more self-service, you know, we've seen it. The patrons are happier. Although there might be some old school folks that if you're not marketing properly that grumble a bit, they get used to it and they start using it and they find it valuable, and taking it away will hurt them. So that's another hurdle we have to get to, is kind of educating our customer on how to move to that new model. And then bringing, for the tellers that are left, I mean, because we've seen some resistance initially, bringing them on board. Arlington Park up in Chicago, as a customer, they actually were a great example of getting their teller staff to see that this isn't a way specifically to replace them, but to get them into more of a customer service mode. So they all were given vouchers initially when the launch happened, and basically they love the app now too. So they're sitting there making wagers potentially on the app as well. And if a customer has questions, the teller who's normally selling the tickets is teaching them how to use the app. in general, I think it's been really good. We're still looking for more penetration when we do renewals since the contracts are so long in the U.S. We usually are offering this in our new renewal, and we're seeing deeper penetration. I think it's it's going to be the way things are going. Unless the market picks back up, which I don't think. I think the most we're hoping for in the United States and North America is a stabilization. Right now, it's the way to go. If you have those days with the spiky nature of pari-mutuel, where you may only have 60 days of live racing throughout the year, it doesn't make as much sense to have such a huge invest in the old school equipment with the physical readers and all that labor for tellers sitting around. It makes a lot more sense to move to a mobile application and have that hybrid approach. Have some of that old stuff, because you'll never, I think, get rid of the traditional Tote terminal. It's still something that's valuable. It helps with education, but also really shift the bulk of your average users over to this. I think that's the basics. Yes. Thanks.